Welcome again to this live stream. In this live stream today we're gonna look at flight planning. But before jumping into the flight planning, let's first look at the new release of Flight Simulator 2024 because there's a new update. The update updates the version to version 1.1.10.0 and it includes some interesting fixes. Right, first of all, there are a lot of stability and performance fixes. First of all, there's the fix the crash that could occur when navigating fast between the challenges. Well, not sure how fast you can navigate between them, but I would say it's not that easy. And there was a fix for a crash when trying to adjust the Tobii eye tracker hardware in the settings menu. Right, the Tobii eye tracker keeps track of your eyes and the positions, and based on that, it will change the view where you're looking at. Right, if you're in a cockpit and you're looking left with your eyes, and the Tobii eye tracker will pick it up, it will move the screen to the left. And the last one, the Vegas one, of course, is the fixed various crashes, right? So a lot of crash fixes are in there in this latest update. Then there's some general bug fixes, like the fixed remaining broken jetways, the updated the message asking the player to link the Steam account, that's specifically for Steam players. And there's the fixed unloading, reloading of the WASM gouges upon restarting a flight, right? The WASM, that's the integration with I would say with a lot of developers are using to kind of generate those gouges, but also to interact with those gouges. Then there are some other things like the JS, which stands for the JavaScript API. That's mainly for developers. It was broken due to the value being encoded in 64 bits, which cannot be handled in JavaScript, right? So the value is now being 32 bits. And there's an aircraft update. They fixed the impact damage threshold for the contact points of the basket that causing a back on track loop that hard locked the game for hot air balloon and flydo. Right, so for the hot air balloon there was an issue with this, so they now fixed it. Really cool to see. If we're talking about aircraft, there's also an aircraft tech update for the model behavior. There's a fix for a crash when hovering interactions. It's only defining an event ID and a tooltip. That's now being fixed. Right, backward compatible with the FSX simple interactions. And there's the flow progression. Fix the bug when leaving the flight with it while in slew mode, right? Slew mode, special mode, which you can activate, of course. My library also contains some updates. There's the added tags on the disabled items to better reflect why they are disabled. So really important, right? Because you want to know why they are disabled. And there's an added tag to warn the player if an item has not been verified by the creator. And that likely has to do with the things that Asobo released, say, several of those items, including from third-party developers, already to the marketplace, even without their consent. But enough talk, right? Let's look at what we're going to discuss today. So today we're going to discuss a few really interesting things. Of course, the main thing is, of course, the flight planning. But before jumping into that, we're now in the boarding part, right? So in the boarding part, we will show you some things. I will also explain a little bit about the nav aids, which are the navigation functionalities which you can use for your flights. Then we'll look at how you can create your flight plan, and we're going to use both the flight planner from Asobo, right, which you can find in on their website, I should say. And the next one is, of course, the flight planner in Flight Simulator 2024 itself, because there's also a flight planner in that, and it's being improved massively and massively. Each time you will get an update. Then after that, we're going to look at the world map. And then, of course, there are some tips, right? So these are, say, some fixtures times, some guidelines, but we can, let's say, kind of deviate from that, right? So there's no hard timing, but don't concentrate on this screen too much because I can't update the times. It was already a lot of work creating a screen, but of course, I love to do it because I think it adds a lot of value. So jumping to the nav aids, right? So the nav aids is pretty interesting. So if you look at Flight Simulator, and if you look at flying, let's say also outside the simulator, you've got those navigation beacons. And a few of them are the VOR with DME, and the VORTAC. So what's really important to understand is that the VOR, as well as the VOR DME and the VORTAC, some of them are phased out, right? If you look at the VOR, the very high frequency omnichannel range station. If you look up at the site from the official authorities, you will see that the numbers of VORs on the map will decrease massively. So it's an old technique, and most people are now switching to GPS, right, which is far more reliable. Then the second option is that VOR DME, right? That VOR DME, the DME stands for Distance Measuring Equipment, which allows you to measure how far you are from that specific beacon. Then the last one is the VOR TAC, and that's a special one. It's the VOR, but then with the Tactical Air Navigation System included. That's mainly for military aircrafts. They're using it a lot, right? So that's really cool to see. Now, how to use these systems? Well, below the text, you can see, let's say, the system which you can use, right? That's the compass, which shows you the direction in which you're flying and also how far you are from that VOR. If you're flying to it or fly away from it, this is just one of those legacy instruments because, of course, nowadays these aircrafts have far more interesting and modern devices where you can see in which direction you're flying. But also in how far you are away from the VOR, right? Because you can fly, let's say, over the VOR beacon, but you can also fly parallel to it. And that's, let's say, kind of special, and likely we will do a specific live stream about that and how to use these equipments. For now, for flight planning, it's really important that you can recognize those types of beacons based on the three icons on the bottom, right? You can see the one with the dot in the middle, you can see the one with the square and then the dot, and you can see that really special one, almost looks like a nuclear thing, which is the VOR TAC. Now, if you would look at the left and would have looked, I would say, before I started this video, you would see a small animation, right? Because you can fly into a certain radial and then intercept the traffic or intercept the channel which the VOR beacon is sending out, because the VOR beacon sends out a Morse code. So if you would change the volume from, for example, for navigation radio 1, then tune into a VOR, you will hear a Morse code, and then you can use it to identify that VOR beacon. Pretty interesting. Now, the next one is the NDB, right? The NDB, I'd say, is an other type of beacon which you can use. And let me see if it comes up on the screen. Here it is, the NDB, the non-directional beacon. And the non-directional beacon, as you can see on the bottom, it sends out a signal, let's say, in all directions. What's important to understand is that the arrow always points to where you need to fly to. So in this case, if you look at the image below, it will show us, hey, if you want to fly in the direction of the NDB beacon, then you need to turn the aircraft left to make sure that you're flying over the beacon. You can use the, special navigation equipment or special radio equipment to tune into that NDB. I'm not sure about the NDB and the future of it, but I think it's an older system which was used also in the past. Then last but not least, before we really start on, I would say, using those flight planning tools, we've got the procedures. And the procedures we've got, in this case, I added 2 of them, but there are a few other ones which I didn't add to this map for now. First of all, there's the standard instrumental departure. That's a predefined route, and we will also look during the flight planning how to use it, which will tell you how to fly when you're departing from a certain runway from a specific airport. Again, it's a predefined route which contains various beacons which you need to follow, and then based on that, you will eventually end up in the route, which you fly to the other airport, and then you will hit the standard terminal arrival route. That's a predefined route again, which will guide you to the airport. It's not mandatory to use. That's applicable both to the SID and the S-star. But okay, if you want to make it yourself easier, and I would say make sure that you're aligned up correctly for the runway in case of the landing, then it's definitely something which you might want to use in the future. So that's for now, let's say, those nice systems which will make your life easier. But then, of course, nowadays we've got the GPS, right? The Global Positioning System, which is based on the satellites in space. And you will see that a lot of aircrafts are using that. However, still a lot of aircrafts are using those VOR beacons, I would say, as fallback in case GPS doesn't work. Hopefully that doesn't occur too much, but in some cases, right, it simply fails. And that's, of course, not what you want to have, but hey, it can happen. I see several people are already watching the stream, so welcome to the stream, right? I hope you like it. So if you have questions, then feel free to put them in the chat. I will keep an eye on the chat also. So if you've got any questions, drop them there and we will have a look at it. So going back to the title screen, right? So we're at the next one already. We're at the next item. We're a little bit, let's say, before schedule, right? Or so let's see what the next item is. And the next item is get started, right? So how do you get started? That's always a good question. So let me share my screen, right? Because that contains a lot of interesting tools. The first thing you need to decide is, okay, hey, which tools do you want to use? And there's a wide variety of tools which you can use. And now with Flight Simulator 2024, we also, of course, also have the built-in flight planner. So the built-in flight planner is, let's say, kind of, let's say, almost a competitor of Navigraph, right? Navigraph, they bought SimBrief, and SimBrief allows you also to do the flight planning. And there's various other tools which you can use for flight planning purposes. In this case, this is the web version of, let's say, Asobo slash Microsoft, which is being developed by the working title team. And this will have a lot of options, right? You can simply, say, select the aircraft, and then you can select the different types of aircraft. And based on that, you can define your information on the route, which we're going to look at in the next part of this live stream. Other than that, you've got a lot of options. So it's really important to look at the options to make sure that they're set correctly. What I figured out is that if you leave it like this and compare it with the settings in the simulator itself, they're a little bit different, which might cause some confusion, right? Let me jump to the sim and then show you what I mean. So within the simulator, you can go to the free flight option. Inside the free flight option, you will have the option to go to the EFB. You can also press the tab key on your keyboard because that will also open the EFB. By default, it will open like this, but that's not always very useful. So you can always use this arrow on the top to increase the size. And then you can even press this small icon, which makes it even bigger. You can see that the options over here, I would say, are kind of similar compared to the ones which we had in the web version of the flight plan. However, you can't select the aircraft because the aircraft, right, you select it normally in the menu. And here you can see I currently select the helicopter. And you can, of course, change that by going back, right? Let me do that. So going back in this case, where is it? Here we go. And then go to the free flight mode again and then change the aircraft. In this case, let's change it to Cessna 172. Right. This one, we're going to select the cargo version. It's good for me. And then we're going to open the EFB again, which now has this one as the default aircraft, which we're currently going to use. In the settings menu, you will see a lot of options, but here you've got that part which I mentioned, right? You can see in this case that there are certain items which are similar, but there are also some issues or some items which are not the same. So keep that in mind. I'm not sure if they're going to fix it because, let's say, for me, it looked a little bit weird and it also caused some confusion at my point, I would say on my side initially. But I either use the one on the web or use this one, of course, the one which you prefer to have. And it allows you to change the speed from knots to kilometers per hour, from feet to meters, from nautical miles to kilometers, from lbs to kilogram, from GAL-US to liters, and from Fahrenheit to Celsius, right? So depending on what you prefer, select the option which you would like to use because that's the most easiest way. The flight planner can be, say, accessed by using this button, right? Which will give you access to that flight planner mode, which will again give you the same options like, okay, hey, these are the clip charts, right? Those are the charts which are mapped to your, let's say, knee pad, which can be easily accessed. For example, the departure and the arrival routes are there. Then we've got the navigation log, which contains a lot of information, the fuel options, of course, the payload, and then, of course, the flight details as well as the route. So important to understand is that if you look at the view, and this is, I would say, kind of really important, that the view here is calculated differently compared to the view which you use in the web version. I'm not sure what's causing it, but keep that in mind because there are some things which you need to configure manually in a web version compared to this one, because this one, all the information is already preloaded, depending, of course, also on the trip you plan to do. The other thing which is important to know is that the number of passengers and cargo can be changed, but that's similar to the version of the web where you can also define all these things. So again, pretty easy to do, but you need to understand it. You need to configure it. Else, I would say you might be stuck in a certain area where you think, hey, it's nice that I define this, but I don't see it back. Well, that's correct because you forgot to change these values. So looking also at the number of viewers, right? Still a few people are looking. So welcome to this channel. Let me create some, I would say, interaction, right? So please would say provide the flight planning tool which you prefer to use. Are you already switched to the Microsoft Flight Simulator 2021 or did you use the SimBrief one or are you still using the SimBrief one? And that's one other thing which I'm going to show you, right? So I'm going to go back to the web browser and here we've got SimBrief, simbrief.com, where you also have the same options because if you dispatch a system, then it's also where you can define your flight plan. This one is a little bit more advanced compared to, I would say, the Flight Simulator one. But if you would look at the end result, it's almost the same nowadays. So you can see that a lot of progress is being made by Asobo and Microsoft by adding those features to Flight Simulator already. And that makes it, I would say, pretty interesting. The advantage of this one that can be used both with Flight Simulator 2020 as well as Flight Simulator 2024. The downside of this one is that it requires a Navigraph subscription to make sure that you can use that latest RAC. Right, so every month a new navigation database is being released, and let's say every aircraft or airliner receives those updates, and they need to make sure that they're updating it in time because RACs do expire. So also keep that in mind, and that's also why you sometimes see Asobo releasing updates which are only updating that RAC cycle. In this case, the latest RAC cycle is 2412. That's the latest. I think it was released pretty, I would say, pretty recent. So validate if you're using either SimBrief or Flight Simulator 2020 or 2024 that this is set correctly. Out of the box, I couldn't find a way that you can change it here. So I'm assuming here that you're using the latest, let's say, version of the RAC cycle, which means that 2412 version. Right, so a lot of cool things are out of the box now already there. So before we jump into the details, let me show you some important things which are on the left side. So on the left side, you have a navigation menu, right? You can use that navigation menu to show, for example, all the airports, but you'll also have the option to change the nav aids. So here again, you can see that VOR, that NDB, that DME, that VOR-DME, the TACAN, the VOR-TAC, and the localizers. So the localizer is something which we didn't discuss, as well as the airways, we didn't discuss them because they're really special, right? The airways is simply, I would say, a predefined route which contains multiple beacons. And if you fly that path, you can exit it from a certain, I would say, starting point and then break out from it from a certain point. But this makes flight planning really easy because if you add an airway, you have the option to define the starting point and the end point. And so you don't have to individually add all those VOR beacons or other beacons to your flight plan because that's a lot of work and that's of course something you don't want to do. Now, if we're looking at the localizers, that's for landing, right? So ILS, right? You have the localizers and localizer being used, say, to both, say, guide the aircraft in the correct direction, right? It's aligned with the runway, but also the altitude is being used, right? So the glide slope, that's the correct name, is being used for that. Now you've got two modes, right? You've got the ILS landing and you've got the AirNav landing. So the ILS will provide both, let's say, the direction in which you need to fly as well as the altitude in which you need to fly using the glide slope. And the glide path is used for the AirNav. And the AirNav contains certain, I would say, beacons on the ground which you can follow. It will give you the direction in which you need to fly, but it doesn't provide that, I would say, altitude which you need to fly at, right? That's really important to understand. So besides the nav aids, we've got these waypoints, and we've got multiple waypoints, the en route waypoints and the terminal ones. The en route, simply if you fly, let's say, in a certain direction, fly to a certain location, and the terminal ones is, I would say, for the terminal one once you're approaching an airport. We've got more. Yes, we've got airspaces. So the of the, I would say, the air is divided, or the sky is divided in multiple classes. And depending on that, you're being assigned a specific class. So keep that in mind. And you will see that sometimes when you're playing Flight Simulator, you can request the HC to transfer to a different class, right? That's what they mean with those airspaces. Then we've got the restricted airspaces, and those restricted airspaces, you will get multiple options, right? Alert, danger, restrict, prohibited, warning, and military. From some of them, you don't want to go in because there's a reason why it's restricted or prohibited. On other parts, right, it's simply there for your information. This one shows you the measurements, right? You can add the measurements to this view, but I would say I'm not using it as we speak. And you get the cloud coverage, precipitation, as well as the wind barbs, which you can show, right? You can switch them on or off. And if you add them, you'll see things being added, right? These are the wind barbs. And then you've got the details, right? You can add cities, build up areas, highways, roads, etc., right? The more you add, the more details will be shown, just like a normal map which you would see. Then the last one is, of course, the darkness, right? So this one shows you, I would say, kind of the time zones, right? So it will show you, okay, hey, this part of the world now has light. Well, here in EMEA, it's already becoming dark. So that's an option which you can switch on or off. I always like this option because it adds some, I would say, realism and also helps you planning your flight. Now on the bottom, you will see also some interesting things, right? You can see the precipitation intensity, which means how hard it will start raining. And it's in millimeters per hour, right? So you can see, say, based on this, you can see what happens. And if you want to see it, I would say on an, animated version, simply click the play option, which will show you the cloud movements, but also the rain which is falling in certain areas. So that's pretty cool. You can see currently it's not that bad, right? It's between 0.4 and 2.6. That's the, I would say, amount of rain which is falling here. Let's say close to, what is it, South America. You can see some heavier rain, right? 9.1 millimeters. But the rest of the world, I'd say, is pretty cool, not too much. So that's really nice. So a lot of options in this tool. So let's get started now with flight planning, right? So let's look at the screen again. Let's look at where we are. Again, we're a little bit before the schedule which I planned, but that's, I would say, not an issue. So we're currently at the first step, which we plan to be in 8 minutes. So we're 8 minutes, I would say, before time. So keep the questions coming, right? If there are any questions, feel free to post them in the comment box because I love to have the interaction also with you, which I had in earlier streams. So currently we're boarding for the create part. That's where we're going to look at how you can create your flight. And likely we're going to spend most time in that area because I do think that it adds the most value and also might raise, or maybe the most questions are raised there, right? So let's switch to the full desktop again, where I'm going to show you how to use, in this first place, the flight planner on the website of Asobo. So, of course, you start with the aircraft, right? So as mentioned already, we're going to use the 172, the G1000 version. And then on the top, bottom, you can select the different flight or aircraft types, right? So you can go to the aerial advertising, cargo, passengers, float, skis, skydive, and tow. So in this case, we're going to select passengers. And if you press on the I from India, you will get some information about the aircraft, right? You can see, okay, hey, there's the manufacturer, the developer, the engine, as well as the range. Unfortunately, the other information hasn't been, I would say, populated. I do think that they will add some more information here in the near future because, let's say, you will see why I say this, I would say, within a few seconds. Then the next part we need to decide is, okay, we're going to select the route. So the route, right? You've got the IFR, which stands for Instrument Flight Rules, and you've got the VFR, Visual Flight Rules. If you fly using Visual Flight Route Rules, you will, I would say, use the, recognition points on the ground for navigation purposes. So in this scenario, you would likely don't use these things, although you can still do it and plan your flight. In this case, what you can do is we're going to move to the instrumental flight rules. Also, another difference is that the altitude you're flying with IFR is in most cases much higher compared to the VFR rules. So then we've got the KTAS, right? That's the maximum speed, as well as the flight level which we want to fly. As you can see, it isn't smart enough that it, let's say, will use the maximum speed on C172 SPG1000 can fly. I believe, let's say, it's 75. And we can decrease the altitude, and you can configure it both as feet, but also at the flight level, right? So you can see the difference. Feet shows like this, flight level like this. So if you want to fly at flight level, if you want to fly 5,000 feet, right, and remove this one, you will see that the flight level will be 50. So keep that in mind. Easy to recognize, but sometimes you're getting stuck. Then the first thing you need to do is change the performance options, because the performance options, as you can see, the average fuel burn has been set to 0 gal per hour. Is it really necessary to do? Well, it might help you because you might need to, I would say, plan some additional, I would say, landing spots where you want to refuel the aircraft. Now the question, of course, is, okay, how can I figure out what the average fuel per hour is? Here it says, okay, hey, it's the average fuel being used over the entire flight, including climb and descent. And that's, I would say, still really vague, right? It would have been nice if they would have populated the value over here. Now, based on some research using the internet, I found out that the average fuel usage for a Cessna 172 is roughly 9.8. But here again comes something, you can only put in complete numbers. So you can't put in the dot something numbers because it will not work. That's something which you need to keep in mind. Once you've done that, there are two options. The first option is that you will add the flight plan here manually. But why would you not want to do this? Well, maybe you already have a flight plan in mind which you want to fly. I mean, you know all those beacons out of the top of your head, and you can provide it here. However, what you most likely will do is move to this map, right? Here you can define the origin, you can plan the route, and you can add the destination. So in this case, we're going to add the origin. So the origin can be added by multiple ways. You can already see that I would say use this one several times, right? Because you can, I would say, simply search for it. So for example, if we search for, let's say, New York, then we will get all those information, all those airports here, right? You can see the bigger ones, but also the smaller ones are here. And you can also see, hey, can I fly VFR? Because this is what you will see, right? If the VFR is green, then you're good to go. If the VFR is not green, then I would say you might have an issue. The cool thing is that besides that, you can press on the E from India, and then you get all the information from the airport. For example, the longest runway, the transition altitude, the elevation of the airport, the exact location based on the longitude and latitude, and then the magnetic variation, which is there, right? So 14, and the current weather. In this case, it pulls the MEDAR data, right, from 1745 Zulu time. It's always in Zulu time. That's 43 minutes ago. Then this was the weather information. If you want to get some more details, of course, you can press the weather details, which will show it in a more friendlier, way. So in this case, the temperature 3 degrees, 270 knots at 90, 270 degree at 90 knot or 9 knots. Sorry, and this is really the wind speed and the wind direction, and you can see that's gusting, right? So those gusting, if I'm correct, maybe someone on the channel knows, this is the maximum wind which is there. Now, of course, got the visibility, the level of the clouds, right? So broken at 3,000 feet. So ceiling is 3,000 feet. The altimeter, which you need to define, right? 1022 hectopascal or 30.18 in AG. And the temperature / dew point, right? 3 degrees, -3. That's sometimes very useful to know. Now we know this, we can also use the TAF, right? The TAF is a different format of the weather. You can see sometimes some more interesting information. But for now, we will stay stuck with the MEDAR data. Going back to flight planning, right? Because that's where we started our conversation. So New York. New York, let's select an airport. Let's select which one we're going to use. Let's select this one, right? The cool thing is that if you click it, you will directly go to the airport. So in this case, it will select this airport, right? It's KSWF. And this will also make sure that this airport is set as the originating airport. So the airport from which you're departing. You can, I would say, preview the chart, right? You can also hide the preview. And if you hide the preview, you can see a lot of interesting things because if you're adding the preview, you can get a chart. And this is a chart of the airport, right? Let me zoom out a bit because it looks a little bit messy. And then zoom in again manually. So here you can see, for example, the taxiways with all their identifications, right? A1, A2, A, etc. You can see the runways which are there. Over here, right? So we've got 16 and 34, as well as 9 and 27. We can see the ANG restricted ramp. We can see the terminal ramp and several other things which are very useful for you when planning your flight, but also when, I would say, driving to the runway, right? Because that's, in most cases, the hardest part. Now we define the origin, we can add the departure, right? And the departure, that's the SID. So the standard instrumental departure. This is an optional part of the flight. You don't have to do it, but you will benefit in some cases from it. And how can we do that? Well, simply by clicking that add option, right? Zooming in again. So the one on the green, that's the active runway, right? And here you can select, okay, I want to fly visual or instrumental. So the big difference is that if you select VFR, you will fly a VFR pattern, which either means you're flying left, right, straight out, left 45, right 45, or overhead. That really depends on the flight you're using, right? On the direction you want to fly, sorry. And if you fly visual. But for now, we want to fly IFR. And here we've got two options. We either do direct, which simply means we're gonna, I would say, take off. And then from there, start our own navigation. Or we can use that SWF. So SWF is one of the, I would say, SIDs. And if you're lucky and you select it, in some cases it will show the data. Not always, but in some cases it does. As you can see, currently it doesn't show it, which is, I would say, a little bit of pity. But let me deselect it and then say select. For some of the airports, you will have the transition, and that's, okay, the end of this procedure and where you will transition to a different part of your flight. So I'm going to select, press select now. And then it will add some information here, right? So if it will add the departure, it will add the, I would say, in this case, the altitude, and it will also show me the preview chart, because you can still preview the chart, and that will give you this information, right? So this is the information which you will get. So SWF9, and then you can see, okay, hey, it goes via this way, via this way, via this way, or we can fly this way. So multiple ways which you can fly with. But here you can see also the altitude restrictions which are applicable to that. So if we would move to a different airport, you will see it adds more information. In this case, I would say I don't think it's very valuable to add. And that's also what I want to show you, is you can easily delete these items, right? You can say remove waypoint, it will ask you for confirmation. And now everything is gone except this one. So we're going to remove it again. And now we removed that standard instrumental departure. So good. We can go and continue. The easiest way to plan your flight for you is to simply define a destination, right? You depart from somewhere and you want to land somewhere. So in this case, we want to land on a specific airport, right? Let me first hide this map, which you can do using the cross, and then select an airport which we want to fly to. Well, let's assume that we want to fly to KBOS, right? That's so pretty nice. We're going to add the destination, and we're going to press that ICAO code, because the ICAO code is being assigned to every airport. And based on that, you can always find the airport, no matter which navigation tool you're using or which flight planning tool you're using. If you don't know the ICAO code, you can search on the internet. Simply search for the airport name and then say, hey, provide me the ICAO code. And that will give you the information about this. Now we selected, in this case, KBOS runway 33 left. And then some other information is there. Again, here you can press the preview chart as preparation of your flight, which shows you some information. So in this case, 33 left, right? Here we see 33 right. So likely 33 left is here, right? You can see it. It's over here. This is the runway which it assigns to us, I would say, as part of the destination. Again, you can click the map over here and then it will close the map. But now you can see, I would say this, if you would fly without any navigation and would depart from this airport and would fly to K-Bus, you will fly 148 nautical miles in a direction of 83 degrees. Pretty nice, but what can I do else? Because I would like to have some additional, let's say, beacons in between. Now, there are two options for that. If you look, say, very closely, let me zoom in again, you will have the auto route option. And the auto route option, what it does, well, let's press it, right? It's creating a flight plan for you. So in this case, once we've added that button or pressed that button, you can see that a lot of things have changed now, right? It has added, I would say, we look at the airport itself. Where is it? It's over here, right? This is the airport we're departing from. After that, we make a very sharp turn to the left side and then fly to Valra and then to Izumi. Then we're going to change the directions to 159 degrees and then we're going to end up at Bashe, etc. And we're flying between these parts. The nice thing about this is that it makes navigation easier for you. And eventually you will still see some long patterns, right? Like this one or this one. But eventually it will also bring you to the airport where you want to be, right? So in this case, it will bring us to this area. And here you will see something weird happening, right? So after ski 2, you don't see anything. However, it has added this part of the flight. And that's, I would say, sometimes really, I would say, nasty, where you think, okay, hey, what's going to happen now? Well, in some situations, you need to define that standard terminal approach route to connect the dots. If you don't do that, what likely will happen if you load the flight plan in Flight Simulator 2020, it will show you, I would say, a break line. Officially, they say, okay, hey, that break line should stay there because you need to manually, I would say, fly that last part, right? Navigate that last part. However, what you could do is remove that disconnect, I think it's called, and then you will can continue using your autopilot, for example, to follow the flight plan. So in this map, you will see now the complete flight plan has been added, right? You can see, I would say, different types, right? If we look back at this one, we can see different en route waypoints, but we also see some PORs with DME. In addition to that, what it has done, it has added an arrival route. And at the arrival route, there are some things which you need to understand for this one. Because you can see some digits over here, right? If you look at the purple ones over here, these are, let's say, the maximum speeds which you can fly at, let's say, while you're flying over this beacon, right? So this is the, I would say, speed restriction, but you also have altitude restrictions. Those are there for a reason. So keep in mind that you really need to follow those guidelines, because if you don't do it, well, you can end up into issues. The other thing which is really good is that if you would follow this, you're very close to the altitude, which eventually brings you to the approach, which is the last part of your flight. And if you're lucky and you've got ILS on the airport, you can use that ILS to, let's say, automatically land your aircraft, right? That's with the bigger aircraft, of course. With a Cessna 172, you likely will do it manually, but you might want to use this part, I would say, to make it easier for yourself to at least get into the right direction and the right altitude at the airport, and then, for example, disconnect the autopilot after this one and then fly the last part yourself. So this is a kind of the easy way. However, there's one other thing which you might consider to configure, and that's the alternate. The alternate airport is if this airport for some reason is closed, you still need to land somewhere, right? And that's where you see a difference with SimBrief, where SimBrief would automatically assign you an alternate airport. In this case, with this flight planning tool for Flight Simulator 2024, you need to define your alternate airport yourself. If you don't do it, you will don't have an alternate airport. Although when you're looking very closely, you will see that something has been added, right? So if you look at this path, you will see that this is the missed approach. So if for some reason you missed this approach, so you missed the runway, for example, you need to fly this direction, and that will ask for, you need to renew your clearance to land on the airport. And after that, follow the instructions of the ATC. But let's assume that we want to add an alternate airport, right? So KBOS was our initial, let's say, plan to land on. But let's add, for example, the KGHG, which is Marshfield. Let's add it to the list. And what now will happen is if you would miss this, and for some reason if the airport is closed for some reason, you will have this as a backup destination which you can use, because eventually your fuel will end up, and I would say then weird things will happen, which you of course don't want to happen. Now with this done, right, we defined the complete flight plan, and you can still modify it by clicking the three dots, because there's always an option to say, hey, I want to add a waypoint before it, after it, I want to change the speed or altitude, or I want to completely remove the waypoint. Not that hard. On the top, now there's some interesting information, right? So there's now the, I would say, the distance of the airport. That's 292 nautical miles. Then 3 hours and 54 minutes flying. That's based on the KTAS, right? So keep it in mind. It also gives you an indication how long it will take you to fly. But other than that, some other interesting things has happened. Because if we now look at the knee board, you will find it has added several boards already. We've got the ground chart, which is there. We've got the airport facilities, which is there. We've got the stars already added there. We've got the ILS, the airport ground for the destination. So a lot of cool things which you can easily use by simply pressing this option over here, right? You can press the preview chart, and if we press that option, like previously, you will get this nice map which will give you some indications. So if you would press this one, for example, for the ILS approach, then you will get this information which will give you a lot of interesting things. For example, you will get the altitude restrictions and the direction in which you need to fly to eventually land correctly on the airport. In this case, KBOS, right? And that's shown over here a little bit clearer, right? So the approach initially is 4,000. Then you will continue flying. Then you will decrease to 3,000, 1,500, 700. And then eventually you will land on the runway, hopefully safe and well. Also below that are the categories, because for ILS we've got category 1, 2, and 3, and we've got the localizer information, which is shown on the bottom part of this chart. So nice stuff by using these buttons, right? And this is, I would say, comparable with what, in this case, Navigraph and SimBrief also have, right? This kind of integration is there, which you can really use for those useful things. Can you also pin chart? Yes, you can do that. You can simply press the pin chart, then it will be added to the pin. But for now, we're first going to check at the flight details, because the flight details allow you to configure some other things. So if we start at the top right, we can see that IFR VFR1. Then we've got your registration number as well as the airline code. So in this case, registration, you could add something. In previous versions of Flight Simulator, it was pre-populated. Currently, it's not. You've got the airline which you want to use, right? So you can say private, or you can use one of the, let's say, airliners, which is defined here. And you can see that a lot of there, right? You can see all Nippon Airs, Cathay Pacific, Japan Airlines, Air France, Air Canada, Delta Airlines, British Airways. But some of them might not be there. If that's the case, you can always press the custom airline, and then you'll be able to select them. Then you've got the call sign, or the flight number and the call sign. So both of them are here. And you've got the flight date, and that's the date which you can define here. And of course, then the off-block time, which is in UTC, right? That's the time which you want to depart or plan to depart. So always keep it in mind. The aircraft equipment, you have multiple options. You can either select it here manually, but you can also use the builder, and the builder makes it easy to configure this. For example, if you want to use the standard equipment, you just place a check mark over here and then deselect it again. And this will add some information to the, that's the wrong option, of course. This one will add the, let's say, Navcom equipment, which is the S, which is likely the standard one. Below that, you've got a transponder code, right? You can say, hey, I want to use mode A, which is squawk only, or you can use the squawk and altitude, depending on the aircraft you're using. I'm going to use this squawk, and then you can define the flight type. And the flight type can be multiple things. It can be a scheduled flight, a non-scheduled flight, a general aviation, military, or other. In my case, I'm going to select general aviation, and this will make it possible to add the remark with the remark builder, right? So you can either type manually by pressing here, or say add remark build options. And those remarks are, say, simply, I would say, not well defined. But here you can, for example, say, hey, I want to have the search and rescue. I want the state aircraft, right? Those are really special boxes which you can use. And if you hover over it, you can say, okay, hey, in this case, I'll followed by a particular reason for special handling. And this would say likely gives you some priority. This is the followed by significant data related to navigation equipment required by appropriate ATS authorities. This is in Flight Simulator all things which you can define to make it more realistic. But of course, you don't need to use it, right? It's optional. Once you've done that, right, you went to all the flight options. There's of course the view and payload. And the view and payload option will allow you to check the view, but also change the payload. And let's start with the payload in this case, because it's something which you need to kind of pre-configure before you can look at the view. So based on the aircraft you're selecting, it will add the zero fuel weight. And zero fuel weight is the weight consists of empty operating weight of the aircraft and the payload, but does not include a fuel. So this does not include any fuel. So that's 1567 lbs. Then here's the maximum zero fuel weight, right? That's the maximum weight without fuel that the aircraft can carry. If you're adding more, then it will likely break. And you can either define the payload manually, or you can set it by click to set payload. Keep in mind that if you change it, right, you will see that numbers are changing. So in this case, the zero fuel weight is increased from the empty from 1567, then it will add up to 207, which is over here. Then we've got a 46% payload, which is still enough room left to create some other things. For example, the number of passengers, also referred to as the pax. In this case, we're going to have 2 passengers. And this is where you can see that the payload already jumps to 83%, right? So we're close to that 100% payload, which is, I would say, good. And that's based on the passenger weight, the baggage weight, and the cargo weight, right? Other than that, you can define the flight type, in this case, GA flight, but you can also select domestic, international, vacation charter, intercontinental, or custom. In my case, I'm going to select GA flight, but if you're flying, for example, with one of the jets or one of the bigger aircrafts, you might want to select here the domestic or international ones, or maybe intercontinental one. Once you've done that, you are, I would say, almost good to go, because then it has calculated everything for you. It has calculated the block view, and block view, if you hover over it, you will get the information, right? The block view is the total fuel required for the flight, including taxi, trip, contingency, and reserve fuel. So this is the total weight we need for the full flight, including everything. Then we've got the ramp weight, right? The ramp weight of the aircraft when fueled and loaded on the ramp, which means that it's loaded with this fuel. That's this part. And then the estimated takeoff weight is this. And you might ask yourself, okay, but why is it less? Well, likely due to some fuel consumption, which is being used. And then we've got the estimated landing weight, which is this one, right? So again, here are some, I would say, things which might look weird, and I still also don't have the answer on that. Is okay, why is the estimated takeoff weight exactly the same as the landing weight? Because you're consuming fuel, so you would, I would say, at least expect it would be lower than this value. But for now, it's there. If you want to make it really challenging, of course, you can say randomize the flight, which will randomize these values for you. Now I'm going to the View tab. So the View tab shows you some interesting things. First of all, it shows you the taxi. Right, this is the estimated fuel required to taxi from the stand to the departure runway. Then normally this is the trip fuel, right? It's the fuel required to, say, completely plan or fly your planned flight. Then we've got the average fuel burn rate, which we defined, and then we've got the contingency. The contingency fuel is carried to the account for additional en route fuel consumption, for example, by hard winds or route changes or ATM restrictions. And by default, it has been set to auto, but you can also change it to either the FAA or EASA, right, which are the, I would say, organizations which are responsible for the airline industry. in the respective, let's say, regions, but by default, it's set to auto. The alternate is 3 left, and then the final reserve in this case is 7. Uh, Based on that, you can add some additional view. You can add some, you can look at the block view, but you can also see if you need to tanker, right? And tanker is simply the additional view which you need to have, for example, to for the return trip, right? So in this case, return trip to the origin airport. Based on that, we'll calculate these numbers, but as you can see, it looks like there's an error because previously it would calculate the trip over here, but likely now it has not done it, which is, I would say, kind of weird. So let's look if the flight has still been set, right? Still, yeah, it still has been defined, so it's kind of weird. So let me go, in that case, again to this one. Let me randomize it. It still doesn't update. So it looks like that they introduced a bug where they, I would say, they didn't calculate the trip view in the amount of fuel required for the planned flight. So we're going to move to the, I would say, flight planning tool within Flight Simulator to see if that one, I would say, is a little bit better. But before doing that, we're going to go to the briefing. And the briefing contains a lot of information. I would say almost too much information to go to. First of all, it will contain the flight date. And if you want to get these hints, like I have, then make sure that the hints option is switched on because it will give you some additional information which will make your life easier. Then, of course, we've got the departure airport as well as the departure airport and the destination airport, right? KSWF, New York Stedford. And then we've got the General Edward Lawrence Logan United States Airport over here. This also looks like to be a bug, right? Because normally I would say this would be the destination airport, which would be KBOS in this case. Then we've got the flight plan released. That's at 1851 Zulu time and the 3rd of December 2024. And then we will move into the other things like the ATC control call sign, right? This is not populated because we didn't, I would say, specify it in those flight details, right? So those flight details, again, if you would populate something like KLM 1234 and then 123 for putting in some numbers, right? Make sure that you're putting in the right numbers, including the registration. And if we would now go back to the briefing, you would see that some of these values have been populated, right? The air traffic control call sign, again, the flight date, and the aircraft name. So in this case, the Cessna 172 SPG 1000. Now we've got the scheduled pushback time, which is where you will be pushed back by the pushback truck, as well as the estimated takeoff time. So between pushback and takeoff, there's roughly 15 minutes for you, which you can, I would say, use for this nice part. With that, right, are there any other things which you can define? Of course, there are other things which you can look at. It's the destination airport. This is the estimated touchdown. So 2108, we're, I'd say, arriving. 2123, we're arriving at the gate. And then we've got the scheduled arrival time, which is in that case 2123. And here you can see that this is the arrival time. You can see that here again, it's something weird which is happening because here it says 2223. So I'm not sure I would say what's the correct time. I believe it's 2123. Besides that, you've got a lot of other things like the cost index, right? So how much, I would say, is the cost index? And these are things which are now being automatically calculated. And this is something which you need to program into your FMS, right? Your flight management system. If for those who, I would say, played with Flight Simulator 2020 for a long time, maybe you did fly in the A320, then there was also that CI value which you need to specify, right? So keep that in mind. Then there's the ground distance, the air distance, the great circle distance, the average wind speed, the average wind components, which is not taken into account as looks like the average ISA deviation, -5, and the average fuel flow, 10 gallons per hour. That's, say, based on the information which we provided, which means there's a fuel bias of 3.4%. That's, say, kind of to use, say, to a safety calculation, I would say it. And here we've got the destination alternate, which is the Marshfield Muni George Harrell Airport. And then the step climb profile, initial cruise level is 15. Flight level 15. Then we're going to the fuel planning, right? So here you can see the fuel planning, which shows you the, let's say, the airport, but also the alternate airport, and then the fuel required and the time, right? So this is the time to the alternate airport is 18 minutes. So, right, if for some reason cables is closed, we can fly in 18 minutes to this alternate airport. Then this is the fuel reserve time, right? So we've got 42 minutes left after, let's say, let's assume that the alternate airport is also closed. We still have 42 minutes left to find another destination where we can land on. Then we get the minimum fuel required for takeoff, the sum of the fuel above, which is, say, 3 plus 7, which is 10. The extra fuel we have, and then we've got the takeoff fuel in gallons, right? That's, say, the kind of standard fuel, as well as the taxi fuel, which we need to have. And these are the times. These are indicated, right? Because it really depends on the speed. If you're going too fast, right? If you push the throttle very hard, they will go much faster compared to, say, what if you would, say, kind of relax this option. Then we've got the block fuel, right? The block fuel are 13 gallons at our boss. That's the destination airport. Here you can see again, it says, okay, hey, the departure airport. So likely, I would say the hints need to be fixed in this displaying tool. And some other information. But in this case, you will see that there's no reason for pick extra view. There's no total view. So there are some things which need to be fixed in this flight planning tool from Soho/Microsoft. Then no tankering, right? So we don't need to have, let's say, to add some additional fuel because the destination fuel is cheaper. So on the destination airport, we've got cheaper fuel. So that's why it's not saying that we need to or that it doesn't recommend to do a lot of tankering. Then continuing, right? We can still see some other information like the alternate route, which is over here. But if we go down, we will find the routing, which is in this case user defined. That's user def, right? So we defined the flight plan. And based on that, it came up with this information, right? So these are all the route strings, which contains the beacons, which we need to pass, right? That's really useful, which makes it really, I would say, nice to get an overview of it. Then in some case, you will get the departure HC clearance. It's for the pilot to write down their IFR clearance. That simply would say you need to always carry a pencil with you, right? Because you need to write it. And the same thing is for the ATIS, where you also need to manually make notes. Then we're going to the times. The times, and we'll go quickly to it, right? Out, pushback, off, takeoff time, on, time of touchdown, and the gate arrival time, and then the block time. So these are the times which are there for you. And the block time in this case is from pushback to arrival at the gate. So really from start to the end of the flight. So that's very nice. Weights are there, right? The passenger count, the cargo, the payload, the zero fuel weight, the fuel weight itself, the takeoff weight in LBS, and then the maximum takeoff weight in LBS. Here you can see that there's no maximum for the landing, right? The maximum takeoff weight limited code. There's the LDG indicates that the maximum tau is limited to the value below the maximum structural limit, which means I would say the physical aircraft. Terrain clearance, they checks are disabled, right? So they're not simulated. Hopefully it will come in the near future. And then we will have the flight log. So the flight log contains a lot of interesting information because you can hover over this, the position, the identifier, and the frequency. And here you can see the information, right? So in this case, what it means is we've got Valre, then we've got the latitude as well as the longitude. Then we've got any other information like, for example, the minimum off-route altitude. We've got the initial true track, the remaining distance, right? That's the remaining distance to our destination, as well as the ground speed in knots, which is set to the maximum speed of the aircraft, in this case 75 knots. The next one is a little bit special, right? Here you see an empty line, but here you see a value being populated. And since I hover over it, you already see what it has done. It has added an airway. And an airway is really easy because it makes flight planning as well as flight programming in your flight simulator so much easier. That you can use these options because you don't need to add those individual waypoints. It will simply add all of them using one simple thing. Then the ICAO flight plan, right? It contains some information. Flight plan should be sent. This is all not simulated, right? Because normally you would need to submit your flight plan because everybody needs to know where you're flying to, which I would say beacons you're passing, etc. but that's not simulated. The airport weather, right? That's the Lido weather service. Will provide you some weather information. In this case, okay, air mats. There's no weather about it. There are segments, also nothing. Also no tropical cyclones, as well as volcano ash. Nothing over there. And then we'll get the departure information. And departure information, that's the TAF data, right? That's the one of the weather types which you can get. I can imagine that it's sometimes hard to read, so always use the built-in functionality from Flight Simulator to have a look at that, because it makes it so much easier to look at that data. And then we've got the destination, which also contains the METAR data and the TAF data, right? So here we've got the METAR data from the airport and a TAF report, and similar for the destination airport, as well as the, I would say, alternate airport. So that's it, right? So a lot of cool things which you can do from flight planning perspective. Now, the next step, of course, is to save the flight plan. So if you want to save the flight plan, you can give the name, right? You can say KSWF to KBOS, and then simply say save new flight plan, because you can see this button has been grayed out. If I press save new plan, it will save the plan, hopefully. Come on. Maybe it doesn't allow the name, could also be the case. Oh, it has saved it now. Or not. No, it hasn't saved it. And normally you would be able to press this option, because you first need to save the flight plan before you really say, hey, copy the link to the to share the flight plan, and then you can share it, for example, with some friends. So that's the first part, right? That's how to plan a flight using the built-in tools of Flight Simulator 2020. Or no, 24. And then one of the questions I sometimes receive is, okay, can I use this one also for Flight Simulator 2020? I didn't test it. I do expect that you can do it, but it might depend, because there's it was, for me, it's unclear where it saves this data. It could be attached to your profile, because you need to sign in before you can get access to it. So let's figure that out in the Flight Simulator itself. And this is the Flight Simulator itself, right? So let's hit escape in this case. Let's make sure that we don't have this one. And then have this one. And then we can likely press the options over here. Or we can change the view of the map, which is not what we need, because I was looking for select. I was looking for the option to load the flight plan. It's now set to the, so let's reset it to the 172, right? Here we go. Escape and save back. That's where we need to be at. And then we can press the option over here. And here you will have a lot of options, including hopefully also loading the flight plan. So let's see. And that's over here, right? So let me increase the size again. So on the top of this one, you have the load flight plan. And here you see the flight plan, which we just defined. It's the KBOS to Kilo Echo Whiskey Bravo, right? It's a little bit weird, because I thought that we took off from Kilo Echo Whiskey Bravo then to KBOS. So here you can also see some weird things are happening, right? So what we can do now is simply press load, which will add all the information to this nice airport. And here you can see it's, well, it defined it correctly, right? So it says, okay, hey, your departure airport is KBOS, and the destination is New Bedingford. Well, now I'm crazy. And this is a different one. So for some reason it didn't save this one correctly. So did it? KSWF, and this was not KS. No. So this is a different flight plan, right? But you understand the idea. You can press the load flight plan option, which will likely load your flight plan. And based on that, we'll add it to your, say, charts also. So if you would now close this big screen, we can go back. And then based on that, you can press this one, recenter on the aircraft. And it will likely show us where we need to go to, although I don't think it has done it correctly. So load flight plan. No, it already loaded it. So it should be good. Should also show it on the map. Let's see. Um, what you will see is that together with the flight plan, all the information is stored here, right? So all the information which you saved here is, I would say, set correctly. So if you did save this, I would say, as part of your normal flight plan, it will also save this information. You've got the zero fuel weight, the total payload, the passengers and the cargo. And here you can see a difference compared to the web version, right? So in the web version, there was literally no option to say, or there was, you needed to define the, let's say, fuel usage per aircraft. While in Flight Simulator itself, you don't need to specify that, which makes it easier for you. Then the fuel, you can also see in this case, it calculates the trip fuel, right? So it calculates the information. And here you can see the contingency fuel as well as the final reserve have also been set to auto. You can change it using that rules option, which will then, I would say, adjust it accordingly. Extra tankering, not recommended in this case, so nothing to worry about. And this, well, from as a user perspective, it's exactly the same, right? So in this case, we already defined the departure runway. We found the route. We added the destination airport. But the only thing which we didn't do is adding the alternate airport. And that's, of course, something which you can still do from this option, right? So you can still go to Flight Simulator 2024, then open the EFB and then use the EFB to plan your flights. That's sometimes really handy. In some cases, it's a little bit, I would say, weird. But I think they will improve it over and over time. So once you've done that, you can add the arrival, right? That's the standard on the departure, or at the approach using these buttons. And here you can see the options which you can select. And the same thing is for the approach, right? For the approach, you could say, hey, I want to use ILS number 5. And then you've got that option, right? You can either directly fly to the airport, or you can use one of those transitions. And those transitions are helping you to, use a predefined route to the airport. And if I hover over it, right, you see what happens. Because if I would select this one, for example, you will see that it will change the flight itself if you press the change procedure option over here. Let me try to center on the aircraft. So let's hide this one. And here you sometimes see that there is some work to do because sometimes it's so difficult to navigate, right? Even I would say, if you would expect it to scroll to work, you will see that it doesn't work, right? So here are some things which really need to be improved, but likely that will also be done because what we saw is that there was a lot of fixes already in Flight Simulator 2024. A lot of nice things have been added to it already, right? So that's really cool. So now let's think about the next step, right? I think we're still a little bit before time, right? So let me switch to the title screen. Let's see where we are. We discussed already several things, right? We first looked at the new update of Flight Simulator 2024, right? The latest update. Then we looked at how to get started, right? Which tools are available? What are the things you need to think about the options? And now we're already at the, I would say in this case, a world map, if I'm correct, because we looked at the world map already a bit. But let's see if we can now go into a little bit more detail and also show you how you can use the world map in your advantage. So going back to the full screen again, right? This is Flight Simulator. Still see people watching, so welcome to my channel for those, I would say, who are watching. For those who are watching this recording back, right? Because it's also available after this live stream. Thanks for watching this one. Please keep the feedback coming. Keep the topics coming where you want to have a live stream about, because I'm planning to add more live streams to my channel as we speak. Likely on a bi-weekly basis, because on a weekly basis is a little bit much. Requires a lot of time, some preparation time. But keep in mind that I will, I'd say, keep continuing posting other videos, especially about those controllers, because I saw that a lot of people struggle with their controllers. So love to see all those interactions on those videos. So maybe we should, I would say, plan the next one about the controllers, right? How to use them. But that's for another part. I will keep you posted about what the next topic will be in the live stream. But for now, we're going to continue with the world map. Because as already mentioned, right, one of the things is that you can load a flight plan. So now let's load a completely different flight plan. In this case, we're going to move to Europe. In Europe, right, you've got a lot of options. So we can also say, hey, I want to find a route in this case, and then we'll add the route. Um, and then we can go back, and then we first need to center on the aircraft, and hopefully it will show us some more information, because currently it's kind of pretty limited, right? So let's first change the view. And the weird thing is that you also see that this one moves back, right? So it looks like that there are some, I would say, improvements required for this tool, because it still is in the US. So recenter on the aircraft. So the aircraft is centered in this case over here. But hey, I'm not flying, right? So that's really special. I'm wondering who this aircraft is, or because hey, I'm not using it. As you can see, there's also a different aircraft now being selected, which is again kind of weird. So let's go again back to the 172, right? So let's say escape and go back. And now we're at flight planning. So what I wanted to show you is, okay, hey, how can we load the flight plan, right? So how to load the flight plan was relatively easy. We could simply press this option, then go to the flight planner and then press this option on the top, where you've got the option to load the flight plan. In this case, I'll load this one. Once you've done that, you can close off this window, and then it should normally show you the flight plan. As you can see, it doesn't do it for me. And likely that's because I forgot to do something. Yes, I forgot to do something. Because what you need to do is, in this case, you need to file the plan with the ATC. Once you've done that, right, you will see that it starts drawing the flight plan on this world map, which also makes, say, kind of sense, right? You can still hover over all the items if you want, which makes it very useful, because you can, say, follow it from the start onto destination. If you look at the destination, you also get some information about the destination weather conditions. But if you look at the top, you can also see the time required to fly, the distance, as well as the, let's say, fuel consumption, which is applicable to this flight. You can still go back to the EFB, right? Because the next step could be send it route to the avionics. If you would do this, then you would send the information to the avionics of your aircraft. Now, the two things which you can do it like this, right? So say send avionics route to the avionics. Then you don't need to manually program the flight in the avionics systems. However, if you want to chance yourself, and I'm really chancing yourself now, then consider adding the flight plan manually to the aircraft itself. I'd say it's a lot of work, but it still is nice to do, right? So if you want to, let's say, go really next level, then it would be the option to do. Then also there's the route from avionics, which will pull it from the avionics. And you can also load and save a flight plan, right? And here you've got the options to load it from the Xbox Cloud Storage. You can load it from the local PC. You can save it to the Xbox Cloud Storage, save it to the PC, but you can also delete it from the Xbox Cloud Storage. So option 1, 3, and 5 are stored in the cloud. So you can create it and, I would say, use it both on the PC as well as on the Xbox, where the load from this PC, of course, only means it's stored locally, where you can, I would say, use this one for. In this case, I'm going to press cancel, right? Because it's there, right? So there's nothing needed. And then I would say you could start, I would say, the flight by pressing the control and the enter key, which you can see over here. But if we look closely, what will happen in this scenario is you will start at the runway. Not always realistic, right? So keep in mind that you can change that. So what you can do is, if you press the arrow down here, you can park the aircraft in a specific, I would say, parking spot, right? So in this case, I can park it at 21D. If I go to 21D, it will put it in that spot, and it would not put the aircraft on the runway. So let's hit start flight. Then we'll put the aircraft on the runway, and then let's see what happens. So it's a little bit weird location. Oh, this looks very scary, right? A lot of dark. I would say it almost looks like say plants or grass, maybe. Well, it looks really weird, but still, I say also on the other end, still pretty cool. So let's see what it happens now. You can see it's extremely dark, and it has to do because it's already, let's say, 8 o'clock over here. So we can press ready to fly, and then we have our light on our head, right? So this is really cool, because now we can walk around. We can walk around, inspect the aircraft. That's, I would say, really something I really like. Also, you can see the reflections on the, I would say, on the people, right? So we're gonna, say, move over here and then watch. And do all the preparations which we need to do, right? So that means also that if you need to pull those red blocks, right, you need to, let's say, right click, and then you can sometimes interact with it. In some case, you can't interact with it. In this case, say right click to remove. So let's remove it, and also remove these ones likely. Uh, so let's move over. We're going to remove the parts from the engine, and then we're going to continue, right? Do we need to remove something else? Likely, if we would remove these ones, it will become a chance to fly. So moving over here again, then I'm going to right click these ones. Let's see if we need to do that, right? Normally you would need to do it. And this would say something which you hear also from other people, that it's sometimes really challenging to, let's say, use those systems. So what I normally do is I would say playing using an Xbox controller to say kind of do these animations, because it makes it so much easier. I would say walking around with the mouse, I would say it's not the easiest part to do. So we're gonna look at the weather conditions, or not the weather conditions. We're gonna look at the wheel conditions. At the wheel start, right, which also needs to be say kind of validated. So here we go. And also check the other one, right? That's where we can go to. Right click the wheel. It's over here. Do we need to do something else? Maybe check the oil, although I don't think it's required for this one. Let's see. No. Hover over it and you will find out soon. And then we can simply enter the aircraft, right? So let's do that. So we're now in the aircraft, and based on that, right, we can look at the individual systems. So the first thing you, of course, want to do is, I would say, create some light, right, because it's really extremely dark. So what you could do is hide the yoke. The cool thing is of that highlighting, right, is that you really don't need, I would say, a specific button for that. But hey, here we've got some light, right, which makes it so much nicer. Uh, and that's, say, really cool. Let's have a look at now the flight plan, right? Because the flight plan, we would expect it has been loaded. So let's wait for everything to settle down, right? There's none within 200 nautical miles. You think it has to do what? Here it is, right? I already expected this to load, and that's really cool. Now the flight plan itself can be accessed by pressing that FPO option, right? That FPO option, as you can see, it already has loaded the flight plan. And based on that, you can navigate to it using these, I would say, buttons over here, right? That FMS button, which you can, I would say, move around, and then you will be able to move to the complete route. Here you can see the en route options, but also the ILS in this case, where it's predefined with already an approach or an arrival 3. It's the ILS 25, which means that we're going to land on runway 25. You can see all the distances also here, right? So that's really easy if you look from this angle. Now, of course, there are always some changes which you might want to make, I would say, during your flight or after your flight. You can still do that, right? Because you can simply say, okay, hey, I want to add a procedure by pressing the procedures option. Let me zoom in a little bit more. And there you can say, hey, I want to either activate the approach, or I want to select the approach, or select the arrival, select the departure. In this case, I want to add a departure to my flight. So I'm going to press this option over here. And then it will give me the options which I get here, right? So we can select them. And here you see, I would say, maybe some kind of secret codes which you expect, but they're really not, right? They're simply telling you, okay, hey, this is the beacon which you want to fly to. And that 3A and 3B are simply the variations in this. So if you would open the flight map, right, or open the EFB, you would be able to, let's say, recognize where those things are. And of course, the EFB is on this end, right? So you can say, go to it and then simply go back from the route, and then you can zoom out and then search for that beacon. So if you would go here, you would likely find Arnhem, right, which is over here. Likely, if you would zoom in, you will find a beacon with that, I would say, same name, which you then can define as part of your SID. That's of course optional. Again, you don't need to do that. It's not mandatory, but it sometimes makes your life easier. So once we've done that, right, once you are happy with it, press the add option, and then you will say, okay, hey, I'm gonna load departure 3A from runway 06, transition on Arnhem. And then you can say either load. And if you would do that, What it will now do is we'll simply add that to your existing flight plan. And that's how you can easily, let's say, change the flight plan. Uh, Things to keep in mind is that you saw that once I added this part has also changed, right? So this part has now changed because you can now see the GPS departure, right? Which refers to, hey, you're now in the departure part of your flight. As I would say, as you're progressing during your flight, you will see other things being changing. You will see to go to en route and then I would say to the arrival. And you can press the source of the system by pressing the CDI option, right? This one refers to the CDI, and you can set the CDI to the localizer, which either localizer number 1 or number 2, or you can set it to GPS. So if for some reason you're flying using the autopilot, and the autopilot has an option where you can say, hey, I want to use the navigation system, and it doesn't follow let's say your flight plan, then first of all, make sure that you're close enough to the flight plan which you configured. And on top of that, make sure that the CDI source has been set to GPS. If for some reason it's set incorrectly, press the CDI button again and then re-enable the navigation option, which you can enable over here, right? Because if you don't do that, it won't enable the navigation option because CDI will deselect or de-trigger that navigation option which you would have in the flight simulator. So you can also do it from the left side, of course, because all the buttons are also over here, right? So it's really up to you what you are going to do. Now let's assume we want to use a different flight, right? So let's assume we're going back to this, let's say to the main menu, and let's take a bigger aircraft, right? Because say this one was cool, but let's now define a complete flight plan by using the built-in flight planner over here. So we're gonna challenge ourselves. We're gonna fly with the Boeing 747-400 LCF, which is a large cargo freighter. And I'm gonna go back and then let's go to the US, right? So in this case, we're gonna use the Boeing aircraft, of course, from somewhere pretty close to the Boeing factory, right? Because we want to use that. Here we've got Seattle, right? And near Seattle, Tacoma Airport, there's also Boeing Airfield, which is this one. So we're gonna set it as the departure. And then if we zoom out a bit, we can define the destination. So this is a way of defining your flight without, I would say, using the flight planner itself, right? So we're going to set this as the arrival. So now it has created, I would say, the destination and the arrival for us. But as you can see, it didn't define any flight plan. And this is where sometimes changes are happening, right? Because in this case, I don't want to fly VFR. I simply want to have all those beacons. Now, the cool thing about this is if you would use this, it will likely not work 100% because, hey, you didn't define a lot of those things. So if you want to make yourself life easier, you can go back to the flight planner and then make sure that you're saying, okay, hey, I want to add some information. And again, the easy way is to use the find route option, which will add all those buttons which are part of the route. And then we'll add it to your flight plan. You can see that the list is pretty long, but that's cool. And then I'll file the plan with ATC, which will add it to the map, and then send it to the route to the avionics, and then close this one. And here you can see what it made for us. In this case, it has added a lot of things to the flight plan. And the cool thing is if you would now go inside the aircraft, let's do that. You would also see that the flight plan has been loaded, right? So there's no need to, I would say, do any customizations of that. It will simply be there. So pretty nice for everybody. Of course, waiting and loading takes a bit of time. So let's wait and then let's see what's happening. So here we've got the aircraft. And of course, one error I made is I put it directly on the runway, which you normally shouldn't do. So don't do it because then you're ending up at the runway. In this case, I need to, say, show you some things while on the runway, which of course not the, I would say, best option to do. So let's go inside inside this one, right? And then let's look at, in this case, this nice screen. For those who are unaware, right, you can press the the camera options using the Control F1 option or Control 2, etc., which will make it easier to, let's say, navigate to this. Now on this, let's say, part, you can look at the legs, and the legs are the beacons which has been defined. So you can see the different beacons are over there. You can see the number of pages over there. And if you would scroll to it, it will add all the information route. So route discontinuity. In that case, what will happen is if you define the autopilot, it will disconnect the autopilot. At least it will disconnect the navigation option from the autopilot. And then you would say kind of back to square one because you might need to re-enable it. Although they still, I think the recommended practices is to fly the last part manually. Of course, you can still define the departure and arrivals manually here, right? So if you, for example, didn't define the departure or arrival, then you can define it from here by using departure and arrival options, where you can define the runways. In this case, for departures, you can select it, right? You can press the option, and then it will move it, right? And we can select runway 32. And then if you want to press the, say keys not active 3, if you press the SID, you can also change the SID if there's an SID, which means a standard instrumental departure available. So keep that in mind. The same thing can be done for the destination, right? If you press the destination one, you can also likely define something there. This button is, come on. I see that sometimes the button is, I would say, in the way. So what you can do is, press the wrong one, because we need to do it using the route option. Come on. Doesn't do what I wanted to do. First I need to press execute. It was likely the issue I was having. No. And then do it via the legs, and then go to the next pages. And where we are here. And then we can, I would say, define the standard terminal approach route, or we can add the arrival, right? It's really up to you if you want to use it. I would say this aircraft, to say, is a really nice one, but a little bit more complicated one. So take your time also to go to all the information around this one. Here you can see that you still can configure the alternate airport, right, if you want. But again, that's up to you. So looking at the time, right, we're almost, let's say, 1.5 hours, and I think we're almost at the top of the hour, or of the bottom of the hour, I should say. So let's go back to the title screen, because it's time for the questions and answers. I don't see a lot of people watching, unfortunately. Also don't see any questions. So opening the floor, right? So if you got any questions, put it in the chat box, because I'm, I would say, giving you the room to ask some questions. Are there any tips which I want to give you while you're waiting and while I'm waiting for your answers? Yes, there are multiple ones. So first of all, I would say I would use the built-in flight planner tool for Flight Simulator 2020, which you can find again in the EFB. If you plan a flight, make sure that you validate the cruise altitude, as well as that you make sure that you, let's say, if you want to make yourself easy, use the find route option. If you want to do it a little bit more complicated, you can, of course, decide to manually program your flight. If you don't like the small screen, there's a tip to increase the size of the screen like this, or even make it bigger like this. Unfortunately, there's no way to say, hey, I want to have the map bigger and this smaller. There's no option for that. What are the other options? Use these buttons. Use these buttons with caution. File plan with ATC, draws on the map, but also make sure that the ATC follows your flight plan. Send route to the avionics. Will ensure that the flight plan is also registered in the flight system. Other recommendations. Make sure that this is set correctly. If you define this correctly, then it will make life a lot easier. And also don't forget to set the fuel weight as well as the passengers if you want to add some more realism to the flight. And also make sure that you can use the fuel options correctly. Other things which I would like to tell you. Yeah, this one. Make sure that this one has been set correctly. Make sure it's being set correctly to the temperature, volume, as well as the weight, distance, height, and speed, right? Depending on what you prefer, again, it's customizable. And here you see some differences between the, I would say, web version of this tool versus the, I would say, built-in tool within Flight Simulator. I will, or at least I do expect that they will fix those issues really soonish. And those are really the tips I have. I don't see a lot of questions, unfortunately. So likely that also means that, let's say, we're at the end of this stream. I hope you liked it. I'm still looking for feedback, right? So feel free to give your feedback in the comment box below this video once the recording is available. And I hope to see you back within 2 weeks' time, where we're gonna do a new broadcast about something really new. If you have a topic which you want to discuss or which you want me to discuss, then feel free to add it also in the comment box below this video. And I hope to see you back next time.